want to give you a little bit of a background of some of the accomplishments. I could go on all day with the accomplishments that this guy has. Served 6 terms as a member of the U.S. Congress from it was Cincinnati area, right, Bob?
Right.
Yeah, Cincinnati. During his time in Congress, he served on the Select Committee on Intelligence, which is one of the most coveted committees that you want to try and be on, overseeing all the nation's secrets. He was on the House Committee on Rules, and he was on a special Select Committee for Children, Youth, and Families. In 1989, he and Senator Bob Dole were official observers in the first ever parliamentary election of a non-communist leader in a Soviet bloc country that basically became the catalyst for the wall coming down. I don't know if any of you have ever seen his wife's Facebook page over the last 3 weeks. They just went on this trip through Europe, and this guy is literally treated like royalty. In a very, and Bob may talk about it, but a very symbolic gesture that when the election took place and they finally had freedom, if you will, the new president, rather than greeting the leader of the Soviet bloc countries, which was the protocol, instead greeted Bob McEwen first. And that was a very symbolic gesture that was, I mean, it was like the shot heard around the world in Europe. It was extremely symbolic, and a lot of people do credit that as being a pretty big influential part of everything happening. And as a result, I'm not exaggerating, he's a humble guy, so he won't tell you this, but I'm telling you, he is treated like royalty over in Europe. He just went on a trip to, I don't know how many different countries over there, and everyone, he's invited to all these parliamentary halls and capitals and presidential palaces and everything. But more importantly, the reason I'm glad to have Bob here is twofold. Most of you know, in my mind, I don't care really how successful someone is, I want to know their heart. And I'll tell you what, Bob's heart for 2 different areas is very strong. Number one, his heart for this country. This guy has served and served and served every single one of us. And we all have reaped the benefits for things this guy has done all over the world that he has done. But his heart for serving others and serving me, he is asked to speak all over the world, literally. And I know that a room like this, compared to where he normally speaks, is nothing impressive. But the reason he's doing it is he's a giver. He's a server. He wants to give back. I don't know if he's going to share, but he is familiar with our issue on a very personal level through a family situation, so he knows what we're going through. But he also knows all the people. We talk about, some of you remember Ed Martin was here this morning talking about Phyllis Schlafly. Bob got to know Phyllis extremely well, but Bob knows our issue. And I still remember, I guess it was about a year ago, I met with Bob after a meeting and took some time out and spent about an hour to sort of mentor me a little bit and gave me some direction of people that I needed to be meeting with in Washington, D.C. And that just opened so many doors. And I'm just so grateful to introduce, like I said, a wealth of knowledge, an influencer of our country, but more importantly, a great friend. So please help me introduce Bob McEwen.
Thank you very much, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. When Mark invited me to speak, I assured him that this is not my area of expertise, and why would you want me? And he said, well, you can talk about what you want to talk about for 5 or 10 minutes, because you love America, but then you understand politics, and we're involved in doing that. And so if you could answer some questions, that would be good, and make yourself available. So that's why I'm here. Not because you need to hear another politician speak, but because I would like to be helpful to you in any way that I can. And I'll just mention that in the Congress, there's a thing called the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee controls every bill that comes to the floor. And it has a membership ratio of 2 to 1 plus 1. And that is that there are 4 Republicans, 2 to 1 is 8 plus 1 is 9. So there are 9 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and they literally write a rule for every bill that comes to the floor. Otherwise it doesn't come. So it goes through committee and does all that, and then it comes up to the Rules Committee, and they write a rule that the House shall meet on May 2nd and consider H.R. 5699 for 2 hours. There shall be only 1 amendment sponsored by the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. So-and-so. And so they control everything that happens. And that's why I would like to be helpful to you, because that's sort of the top of the pyramid in the Congress. You don't have to ask anybody for anything, because you control every bill that comes to the floor. And then you manage them on the floor, which is what I did for about 1/3 of the legislation. One of the interesting things was, well, I'll get into that if there's questions and answers, number one. Number two is that, that this country is a unique place, and I think it's appropriate that we stop and recognize that on occasion. Verse of Scripture says that hope, being often deferred, maketh the heart sick. And so when you're always hoping for something and it never comes to fruition, you finally just become faint-hearted. And what has happened to an entire generation, I fear, in America at this moment, that you grab a 30-year-old and say, give me 5 good things about America, and they'll look at you and they'll say, well, I learned slavery, and I learned slavery, and I learned slavery, and I learned slavery. And other than that, they don't know American history, and what this country truly is a lighthouse for the rest of the world. People hope to say, half of all the people on earth live on less than $2 a day. Half of those live on less than $1 a day. The second richest spot on earth is Western Europe, France, Germany, Britain. In America, we have a level below which we will not permit a person to sink. You come to this country, sit down on a park bench, put your feet up, gripe and complain about the country. We will bury you with stamps for food, a roof over your head, a bed to sleep in, unlimited health care for you and anybody you've ever met, and unlimited education. A person living in poverty in America. This is a Rector study done by the Heritage Foundation, the Wall Street Journal, over 24 months for the past 37 years. A person living in poverty in America is more likely to have a telephone, a television, an air conditioner, an automobile, eats more meat and has more square footage space than the average resident of the second richest spot on earth, Western Europe. Now the question would have to be, why? It's important that we know the answer to that question, lest we elect people who want to fundamentally change America, and then there's no place else for us to go. For thousands of years, people hoped to someday fly. It was Americans that invented the airplane, and the light bulb, and the telegraph, and the telephone, and the global positioning, so they put men on the moon. There are skyscrapers all over the world. Why? Because an American named Elisha Otis invented the elevator. It made it possible. And there are places where it's 100 and 120 degrees. Why? Because an American named Willis Carrier, God love him, invented the air conditioner. And if a girl a little 10-year-old in Poland buys a dog collar that has a little chip in it, and she loses her puppy dog, she can go on her cell phone and check on the internet a global positioning system that will tell her exactly where her puppy dog is. All of it, conceived, invented, and maintained by Americans. Now, this 4% of the population of the world creates more books, more plays, more symphonies, more copyrights, more inventions than the rest of the world combined. And that has been lovingly entrusted to us, and it's important that we understand and appreciate it, lest, as I say, people come along and say, we need to do, if you saw the debate the other night, we need to steal from these people and give to those people, and you vote to me to do it, and I'll make sure that you all live in the poverty just like Venezuela or whatever. So so in the process, we understand that this is a great place. Now it's been entrusted to us to do what needs to be done, and there's constant battles that go on, and that's where with Mark's effort, he mentioned that I care about this very, very deeply. I want to help you in any way that I can.